Chapter 251. Come in, my wife is asleep. Several days passed in a flash. Willow briefed Miranda on the company's affairs before traveling with Caspian to Naporia. In Naporia, many experts had received invitations from Galecrest, though they didn't quite grasp the intentions behind these invitations. Nonetheless, given the position that Galecrest held, some chose to join in the fun. The entire atmosphere in Naporia became lively because of this. At the headquarters of Galecrest, Cole sat on a tiger-patterned chair. "Sir, is the martial arts competition specifically organized to get rid of Caspian?" Wylie stood below and asked cautiously. "Caspian? He's not worth my attention. The reason I organized this competition is to recruit more martial arts experts. This way, Galecrest can become the overlord of the southeastern part of Diatorin." Cole sneered disdainfully. In Cole's eyes, Caspian indeed had some ability, but not enough to pose a threat to him. He wasn't as foolish as Wylie to be played by Caspian. Upon hearing this, Wylie's hopeful gaze gradually dimmed. He had joined Galecrest in hopes of regaining control of Easton. However, Cole's thoughts were not focused on that matter at all. "Wylie, don't worry. Since I promised to help you return to Easton, I will keep my word. Besides, I've already sent invitations to Caspian and the members of Celestial Sanctum." Cole noticed the change in Wylie's emotions and spoke calmly. At this, a glint of light flashed across Wylie's deep eyes. "Sir, will Caspian and the members of Celestial Sanctum come?" Wylie asked cautiously. "Whether they come or not doesn't matter. Through this martial arts competition, I can recruit more martial arts experts. When the time comes, it will be easy to wipe out Celestial Sanctum and Caspian," Cole said with a serious expression. "If they do as I wish and dare to come to Naporia, they won't ever return. Easton will sooner or later belong to Galecrest." Cole's words delighted Wylie, but the next moment, he sensed that something was amiss. Easton would sooner or later belong to Galecrest. What did this mean? Did Galecrest intend to expand its influence in Easton? If that really happened, even if Wylie returned to Easton, it would be pointless. He might just become a puppet for Galecrest. That was not what he wanted. "Why? Do you have any objections?" Cole asked coldly, seeing that Wylie was silent. Wylie sensed the killing intent in his words. "I dare not have any objections. I will follow your arrangements," he hurriedly replied and nodded. Cole then burst into laughter. Seeing Wylie's compliant manner, Cole started feeling a bit satisfied. As long as he could recruit martial arts experts and take control of Easton, no one in Naporia could rival him. At Naporia International Airport, no wonder it's a tourist city, and it's also an ancient capital. Just after getting off the plane, Willow looked at the surrounding buildings and felt a sense of calmness. Life here didn't seem as hurried. Instead, it had a more leisurely pace. Naporia had its own unique characteristics. "Willow, let's find a place to rest for a while." Caspian smiled. He used to be out of the country to fight battles, so he intended to take the opportunity to explore Diatorin. Soon, Willow and Caspian reached Naporia Grand Hotel, the largest five-star hotel in Naporia. They took a cab to get there and booked a presidential suite. Willow was a bit tired from the flight, so she freshened up and went to sleep first. Sylvia also arrived at the suite's living room. She had been on the same flight as Caspian, but intentionally booked a seat far away from him. "Sylvia, do you have information about the power distribution in Naporia?" Caspian asked Sylvia after he made sure that Willow was sound asleep. "Caspian, I've already done my research before coming here. The biggest faction in Naporia is Galecrest. It has a long history and profound foundation. However, several years ago, there was some turmoil with them that led many of its members to leave." Sylvia entered and reported. "Oh, tell me more," Caspian urged with a furrowed brow. He heard rumors about the martial arts families in Diatorin. Years ago, these families were everywhere. But after the turmoil, they fell into silence. Over a decade ago, Mahayan Pavilion was one faction that split from Galecrest. Some disciples of the Celestial Sanctum also originated from Galecrest. There are also the 8 noble lineages in Naporia. Currently, they are the only ones who can contend with Galecrest, Sylvia explained. At that moment, there was an urgent knocking at the door. "Mr. Lynch, I am Melvin Jones." A respectful voice sounded from outside. Caspian's expression turned serious. How did Melvin find him? Caspian, Melvin contacted me before, but I didn't tell him about coming to Naporia, Sylvia said. She had forgotten to inform Caspian about this matter. It's all right, Caspian replied. Come in. Caspian didn't pay much attention, believing that Melvin wouldn't dare to act recklessly now. I, Melvin, leader of Celestial Sanctum, pay my respect to Mr. Lynch. Melvin pushed the door open and cautiously walked in. Melvin, you have quite the nose. I've just arrived in Naporia, and you found me. Did you track me? Caspian's face was calm. I dare not. I happen to be staying in this hotel too. I saw you earlier and followed you. Also, Galecrest sent me an invitation, Melvin explained nervously. Previously, he had contacted Sylvia to gauge Caspian's opinion on Galecrest's invitation, but she hadn't gotten back to him. Oh, they sent you an invitation too? Caspian asked in confusion. I used to be under Galecrest. Later on, I followed the former leader and left. Although it's been over a decade, the relationship between Celestial Sanctum and Galecrest is significant. I also wanted to see what Galecrest is up to, Melvin quickly explained. Upon hearing this, Caspian finally understood. Galecrest's power several years ago was undoubtedly immense, as a branch of theirs was capable of dominating a region. Do you know the purpose behind Galecrest organizing this martial arts competition? Caspian inquired. Melvin shook his head. I'm not sure. At first, I thought they simply wanted skilled experts to try combating each other. But upon further thought, it seems the situation isn't that simple. Galecrest might have some plans. Do you have any plans? Caspian asked with a smile. Melvin's sudden visit undoubtedly meant he had some intentions. Besides, he was extremely sharp and wouldn't disclose everything to Caspian. I came here abruptly to discuss this matter with Mr. Lynch, and there's another person who wishes to meet you, Melvin said, waving his hand. Following this, an elderly man in a robe entered the room. This elder appeared to be around 70 to 80 years old, yet he exuded vitality, emitting a strong force. Clearly, he was a martial arts expert. I, Georgie Landor, pay my respect to Mr. Lynch. The elder lowered his head. Caspian examined him for a moment. Caspian, Georgie is from one of the 8 noble lineages in Naporia. He's the head of the Lander family, which ranked 4th among these 8 families, Sylvia whispered in Caspian's ears. Caspian nodded. At this moment, Georgie was also observing Caspian intently. Chapter 252, Hidden Agendas. Caspian looked unassuming despite his youth. Although not clad in luxurious clothes, he exuded a commanding presence. Why has the head of the Lander family sought me out? Caspian asked Georgie. Mr. Lynch, we, the Lander family, seek your aid, Georgie respectfully requested. Caspian maintained his silence, his eyes showing no hint of emotion. Mr. Lynch, the true intention behind Galecrest's martial arts competition is to recruit adept martial experts. Their ultimate goal is to eliminate the 8 noble lineages and target Easton. Galecrest has evil motives, Georgie hastily explained. Upon hearing this, Caspian swiftly understood. There was no room for 2 dominant forces. The strength of the 8 noble lineages should not be underestimated. For Galecrest to establish supremacy in Naporia, they had to remove all opposing forces. Georgie's visit to him now made perfect sense. I fail to see why I should help you. What do I gain from this? Caspian smiled. At his words, Georgie paused, seemingly anticipating Caspian's response. Mr. Lynch, Galecrest is our common foe. We should unite against them. Once Galecrest gains strength, its next move will be to eliminate all its enemies, including the 8 noble lineages, the Celestial Sanctum, and, of course, you. Georgie calmly explained. His words made sense. However, Caspian didn't see Galecrest as a threat. Are you representing only the Lander family or all 8 prestigious families? Caspian asked. I've been secretly chosen as a representative by the other 7 families, but we've reached an agreement and hope you can help us. Georgie hesitated. In such circumstances, no family would willingly seek external aid. If Galecrest found out, the repercussions would be severe. Hence, the Lander family was tasked to negotiate with Caspian. Despite being nominally ranked 4th, their actual strength lay at the bottom. Caspian roughly understood Georgie's intent. He was merely a scapegoat. The 8 noble lineages sought collaboration, but feared repercussions. Thus, they came up with such a clever strategy. Seeing Caspian's silence, both Melvin and Georgie nervously swallowed. If he declined, they would undoubtedly be destroyed by Galecrest. "I can work with you," Caspian calmly stated after sipping his coffee. "Thank you, Mr. Lynch." Melvin and Georgie were overjoyed at Caspian's agreement. "However, I have a condition," Caspian added. Both Melvin and Georgie looked at each other and said carefully, "Mr. Lynch, please speak. We can join forces, but you must follow my orders," Caspian stated. Melvin had no objections to this request. He knew Caspian's ability and believed in his leadership. Georgie, however, hesitated. "Mr. Lynch, we have no objections," Melvin hurriedly said, nudging Georgie discreetly. "That's settled then. You can leave and wait for further instructions," Caspian said calmly. "You may leave," Sylvia added. Afterward, Melvin and Georgie left the room. As their footsteps faded, Sylvia asked, "Caspian, is it necessary to cooperate with them? It feels like they just want to use your help against Galecrest." "Do you think I haven't noticed? They push forth the weakest family, which indicates their lack of sincerity. But it's fine. They might know a bit about Naporia's situation. I'll regard them as spies. In this world, everyone will use one another to gain benefits." Caspian chuckled. Hearing this, Sylvia nodded. She didn't have much thought as her primary concern was Caspian's safety. As for those strategies, it wasn't her forte. Meanwhile, at the Galecrest headquarters, "Sir, there's bad news. Our sources found out that Caspian has arrived in Naporia. The head of the Celestial Sanctum, Melvin, and Georgie, the head of the Lander family, went to the hotel to find Caspian. And they stayed there for over an hour," an elder from Galecrest reported to Cole. Cole remained unbothered upon hearing this. However, Wylie seemed uneasy. "Sir, the Celestial Sanctum and the 8 noble lineages in Naporia might have formed an alliance. We need to act. The martial arts competitions begin tomorrow. Who knows what they might do?" Wylie interjected. "No worries. I've long known the 8 noble lineages wouldn't sit idly by. But our priority is to recruit more martial artists. Once Galecrest is filled with elite experts, wiping them out will be as easy as pie," Cole said disdainfully. Wylie began to speak but was promptly interrupted by Cole. Billy, who was standing behind Wylie, was startled when Cole called him. "Yes, sir," Billy asked nervously. "Billy, there's an opportunity for you," Cole smiled. Billy looked tense, waiting for his words. "Go to Easton, and let the 4 noble lineages know that Galecrest can assist them in taking down the Celestial Sanctum. As long as they cooperate, Easton will belong to them," Cole ordered. Both Wylie and his son were shocked. Their aim in joining Galecrest was to reclaim their dominion in Easton. Cole's actions were supporting other forces in Easton. Wasn't this breaking their previous agreement? "Sir," Wylie urgently spoke. "Wylie, don't panic. This is a temporary plan. Internal conflicts among the forces in Easton might work in our favor. When you return to Easton, things will be much easier for you." Cole waved his hand dismissively. Wylie fell silent. He couldn't believe Cole. Such a scheming person like him was always unpredictable. He dared not say much while relying on someone else's support. "What's the matter? Billy, you don't want to do it?" Cole asked coldly. "Sir, my injuries haven't fully healed, and my skills are average. I fear I may not handle such a responsibility." Billy hesitated. Easton was in crisis, and returning now would be courting death. "No problem. I'll send a capable assistant with you." "Night Shadow," Cole called out. Soon, a sinister-looking man emerged from the inner hall. Chapter 253 Beauties Everywhere in Skyfeather Pavilion. "Sir," Night Shadow nodded respectfully. "Go with Billy to Easton. If there's any trouble, you handle it," Cole instructed Night Shadow. "Yes, sir." Night Shadow nodded. "Billy, do you feel reassured now with Night Shadow accompanying you? If you accomplish this mission, you'll be the senior elder of Galecrest," Cole stated while looking at Billy. "Thank you, sir." Billy was ecstatic. He was free to do whatever he wanted as the son of the master of Mahayan Pavilion before this. But now, He was nothing in Galecrest. To become a senior elder of Galecrest sounded like a great choice for him. On the side, Wylie was stunned. He couldn't comprehend Cole's actions. Cole made his son a senior elder, but what about him? Anger surged within Wylie. Was Cole trying to exclude him? It seemed that Cole intended to cause a rift between himself and Billy. His intentions were malicious. He not only sought control of Easton but also aimed to take over Mahayan Pavilion. A sinister smile appeared on Cole's face as he glanced at the grim-faced Wylie. The following day, the martial arts competition officially began. Veiled Dragon Bay was a prime area in Naporia. Galecrest's main hall was also located within Veiled Dragon Bay. Early in the morning, Caspian left the hotel with Willow and headed toward Veiled Dragon Bay. As they reached the hotel's entrance, a stretched Lincoln pulled up. "Mr. Lynch, please get in. I've arranged a car for you." Melvin appeared outside the hotel and swiftly alighted from the Lincoln. Caspian nodded and gestured for Willow to join him as they boarded the car. He had to admit that Melvin was quite considerate. "Melvin, do you know who else has been invited to the martial arts competition?" Caspian asked as soon as he got into the car. "Mr. Lynch, almost all the ancient martial families from the southern part of Diatorin have come. There's 1 pavilion, 2 gates, 3 halls, 4 sects, and 10 major factions." "Oh, can you elaborate?" Caspian became interested and continued to ask. "Skyfeather Pavilion is the only pavilion, while the 2 gates are Azure Flames and Thunderfire Gate. These 3 are the top forces in the south. The 3 halls are 9 Cauldrons Hall, Blood Mist Hall, and Profound Darkness Hall. Then there's the 4 sects, Divine Dragon Sect, White Tiger Sect, Black Turtle Sect, and Divine Phoenix Sect. These are second-tier forces. The remaining 10 major factions." Melvin started detailing them. However, among these factions, one no longer existed. Recently, the Flying Dragons, which was part of the 10 major factions, was suddenly wiped out, causing quite a stir in their circle. Although they were only a 3rd-tier force, its strength couldn't be underestimated. Its overnight destruction shocked many, throwing the major forces in the southern Diatorin into a state of panic. Several factions sent out people to investigate the cause of its demise in South Lake City, but all their efforts were in vain. The news of its annihilation became a tightly guarded secret, inaccessible to the general public. However, Melvin knew that Caspian was from South Lake City. Moreover, the downfall of the Flying Dragons was intricately linked to Caspian. And yet, there was no visible emotional reaction on his face. Caspian only nodded. He had already grasped the distribution of these forces. Why isn't Galecrest included? And Celestial Sanctum isn't among them either. Caspian inquired with some confusion. Galecrest isn't among them because their strength far surpassed the other factions. As for Celestial Sanctum and Mahayan Pavilion, they have always been considered as factions under Galecrest, and, thus, weren't included. Melvin explained further. Caspian nodded and didn't say much. It could be said that Galecrest harbored great ambitions. Combining these forces wasn't an easy task. Caspian had begun to be interested in the martial arts competition. He wanted to know what the leader of Galecrest had in mind to make others obey him. 20 minutes later, Melvin said, "Mr. Lynch, we're here." Afterward, Caspian led Willow down the car. The minute they got out of the car, they saw a bustling crowd in Veiled Dragon Bay. Many martial arts experts were there in their robes and carried weapons in their hands. They thought they were dreaming, and had walked into a film set. "Mr. Lynch, come with me." Melvin led the way while Caspian and Willow followed behind him. They, too, wanted to see the scenery in Veiled Dragon Bay. Veiled Dragon Bay was situated by the mountains and water, with beautiful scenery. Combined with man-made creations and decorations, it felt like a paradise. It was an excellent choice for Galecrest's headquarters. Afterward, they arrived at Bluestone Square. At this point, it was filled with more than 10,000 people. "Mr. Lynch, this is the main hall of Galecrest." Melvin pointed to a group of buildings not far away. "Galecrest looks quite impressive." Caspian nodded in acknowledgement. As expected of a top-tier faction, even their buildings were more luxurious than others. The master of Azure Flames has arrived. Someone suddenly shouted. A group of men wearing fiery red robes with large hammers entered. The leader was a man who was bare-chested and looked fierce. He was the master of Azure Flames. Mr. Lynch, this is Astor Stevens, the master of Azure Flames. He has already reached Eternal Grandmaster, and every member of Azure Flames possesses immense strength. Their hammers can crush people directly flat. Caspian nodded in response. An Eternal Grandmaster, what a clown. The mistress of Skyfeather Pavilion has arrived. Soon after, a group of sweet-smelling women walked out. These women were clad in white and long dresses with delicate feathers embroidered on them. Each of the women in Skyfeather Pavilion was beautiful, displaying an alluring demeanor. Everyone couldn't help but take a few more glances at them. The leading woman, around 20 years old, looked elegant and composed. She was the mistress of Skyfeather Pavilion. Unlike others, she exuded an extreme charm in her moves, captivating hearts with her smiles and gestures. Her mesmerizing eyes seemed to see through people. Mr. Lynch, this is the mistress of Skyfeather Pavilion, Avery Kirk. Their members are all females. They must be exceptionally beautiful to enter the faction. The difference between their faction and others is that they hold a white fan, which is their strongest weapon. Melvin introduced the mastermind. Upon hearing this, Caspian was momentarily stunned. The Skyfeather Pavilion was indeed quite unique. Were they establishing a sect, or were they doing a beauty contest? They're so elegant and beautiful. Willow couldn't help but exclaim. It was her first time seeing such a grand gathering. She wasn't inferior in beauty to Avery, but the grandeur of their attire made them all the more stunning. Willow, if you wore clothes like that, you'd definitely be 100 times more beautiful than them. Caspian held Willow's delicate hand and smiled. Willow's lips curled up slightly, and she felt a warmth in her heart. Oh, Miss Kirk, I never expected even someone as beautiful as you to participate in the martial arts competition. Astor teased as he approached Avery. Why wouldn't I come if you're here? Avery retorted coldly. Looking at Avery's aloof attitude, Astor didn't show any displeasure. Avery was famously known as an ice queen, the kind of beauty that made one desire her even more. Avery the Beauty, do you know why Cole chose to organize this martial arts competition? Astor asked. Are you pretending not to know? I don't believe you don't know his intentions, she replied, her brows furrowing slightly. It seems like Galecrest has quite the ambition. Astor laughed. Afterward, members from other factions started arriving. The entire Veiled Dragon Bay was bustling. The master of Galecrest has arrived. Once all the factions had gathered in the square, another shout rang out. Under the crowd's gaze, Cole stepped forward. We pay our respects to Mr. Wilson. Upon seeing him appear, everyone nodded and saluted. Caspian remained calm, standing straight in place and creating a stark contrast with the others. Cole noticed him standing there and paused for a moment. Who among those present today dared to show disrespect? Sir, that's Caspian, remarked Wylie, standing on the side. Upon hearing this, Cole nodded. He scrutinized Caspian once more, a glint of intensity flashing in his eyes. In the next moment, his heart was filled with murderous intent. How dared he disregard him? Caspian had committed a grave offense. Noticing Cole's gaze, a slight smirk played on Caspian's lips. The people standing beside Caspian trembled in fear. Who was this man? How dared he disrespect Cole? Wylie glared at Caspian, and his eyes were filled with fury. If it weren't for Caspian, he would still be ruling over Easton. Now, he was under Cole's control and had to act according to his whims. He gritted his teeth, wishing he could kill Caspian on the spot. Caspian noticed Wylie's hateful gaze but remained unbothered. He viewed Wylie as nothing more than a defeated man, unworthy of his attention. If Caspian truly intended to kill him, he would already be a lifeless body. Caspian, you dare to come to the martial arts competition. Today, you're as good as dead, Wylie thought to himself as he observed Caspian's indifferent demeanor. Mr. Lynch, this is Cole Wilson, the master of Galecrest, Melvin said. Even without Melvin's reminder, Caspian could discern Cole's superior air among the crowd. This man was undoubtedly one of the most exceptional Eternal Grandmasters. Thank you to everyone for attending this martial arts competition. Cole laughed heartily. However, his fake gratitude didn't sit well with the audience. Several prominent figures wore smiles on their faces. Avery and Astor were both anticipating the upcoming spectacle. As we all know, the ancient martial families in the southeast have been at odds. This time, I wish to form an alliance with all the forces that are willing to join us. If we stand united, we can face all threats with full confidence. What do you think about my proposal? Cole continued. After hearing his words, everyone understood his true intent. He was ambitious and intended to unify all the martial forces in Diatorin. Did he intend to seize half of Diatorin? I have a question. At that moment, Astor of Azure Flames spoke up. Mr. Stevens, please share your thoughts, Cole said, looking at Astor. If we establish an alliance, who will lead us? Unless Mr. Wilson had long decided to take charge. Astor grinned mischievously. All eyes turned to Cole. They were all eager to know his true intentions. Good question. Since I am the one who suggested this matter, it's only fitting that I lead. I'd like to ask all of you, who else can take on this responsibility besides me? Cole chuckled. His words caused a stir among the crowd. They had expected Cole to be more tactful. Instead, he shamelessly revealed his true goal to everyone. Witnessing his smug demeanor, the crowd understood that he had long been planning this move. Astor and Avery exchanged glances, both wearing grim expressions. Cole's goal was now fully exposed. He intended to unite all the forces in the southeast. Avery stepped forward. Mr. Wilson, if you wish to lead us, you must show some results. The previous destruction of the Flying Dragons in South Lake City led to the 9 remaining major gangs. To this day, we have no clues about the perpetrators. If you want everyone's support, at the very least, you should resolve this matter. Otherwise, it's hard for us to approve of you as the leader. I've already identified the person who wiped out the Flying Dragons. Cole sneered. Who? The crowd looked at Cole expectantly. At the time, the sudden fall of Flying Dragons had many factions worried about their own safety. The inability to find the mastermind behind it had kept the remaining 9 major gangs on edge. Given their achievements were founded on vigilance, they were particularly concerned about this matter. It's Caspian. Cole stared intently at Caspian, his voice filled with hatred. Caspian. The people present were perplexed. Who was Caspian? They had never heard of him before. Wylie's expression darkened as he found it absurd. How much was Cole hiding from him? It seemed he had secretly investigated Caspian. Meanwhile, Caspian remained unbothered. Mr. Wilson, nobody has ever heard of the person you mentioned. Are you making him up? Avery questioned. Not only did she not know who Caspian was, but the rest also didn't know him either. The person is here today and is the mastermind behind Flying Dragon's demise. Cole pointed his finger. The crowd looked in the direction he pointed. Sensing the hostile gazes directed at them, Willow held onto Caspian tightly. Caspian gently patted her hand and smiled faintly, reassuring her that she had nothing to fear with him around. Amidst the complex gazes from the crowd, Caspian remained unmoved as he gave them a cold and indifferent smile. Chapter 255, Astor's Defeat. Astor and Avery were somewhat skeptical. They didn't entirely believe Cole's words. He accused Caspian of being the mastermind behind the Flying Dragon's fall with no evidence, making it hard to convince everyone. Mr. Wilson, do you have any evidence to support your claim? This Caspian doesn't seem remarkable. It's hard to believe he could have been the mastermind behind the Flying Dragon's destruction, you know, Astor asked curiously. Then, he added, they had 4,000 to 5,000 members. It wouldn't have been easy to wipe them out overnight. Cole smiled calmly, as he had expected that someone would question him. He had thoroughly investigated Caspian beforehand, especially concerning the events in South Lake City. Caspian, a mere son-in-law of the Stewart family, had obliterated Mahayan Pavilion in Easton. Overnight. It was indeed unbelievable. Moreover, Cole had uncovered some details. The Flying Dragons initially troubled Caspian, but they were vanquished overnight. Similarly, members of the York family of Dord City had confronted the South Lake Corporation and returned in defeat. After careful consideration, Cole concluded that Flying Dragon's demise was intricately linked to Caspian. In other words, Caspian was the mastermind behind their fall. This meant he possessed extraordinary strength. He was definitely not as simple as people made him out to be. Caspian, Did you wipe out the flying dragons in Easton? Cole looked at Caspian and said with a smile. The crowd was incredibly shocked. Astor's face turned dark as he remembered that he had challenged Cole for evidence to prove Caspian's involvement. Yet, he directly questioned Caspian in front of everyone. Anyone with brains wouldn't admit it under such circumstances. Yes. I destroyed the flying dragons, Caspian stated matter-of-factly as he nodded. The crowd was horrified. Caspian's response was jaw-dropping. He didn't hesitate to admit it. Many factions were eager to find the mastermind behind the flying dragon's demise. Little did they know that the person they were tirelessly seeking was standing right there, and most shockingly, he directly admitted to annihilating the flying dragons. After hearing Caspian's words, the ancient martial arts experts present felt as though Caspian had delivered a harsh blow to their faces. Cole was momentarily stunned and somewhat amazed. Initially, he thought Caspian wouldn't admit so easily. In reality, Caspian had no reason to deny this. As the Diatorianian god of war, destroying a small gang wasn't something that he needed to hide as it was insignificant to him. Mr. Stevens, Caspian had confessed. Now, do you believe what I said? Cole said to Astor. Astor was momentarily speechless. Since the culprit had confessed, he had little to say. Caspian, did you truly wipe out the flying dragons? Astor asked. His expression turned grim as he stared at Caspian. Are you deaf? Didn't I admit it a moment ago? Caspian replied impatiently. Seeing Caspian's disdainful expression, Astor couldn't contain his anger. Did you know that the Flying Dragons was an affiliate of Azure Flames? He roared in anger. Azure Flames was a top-tier force in Diatoran, and naturally had other factions affiliating with it. Flying Dragons was one of them. Astor felt furious when Flying Dragons was eliminated because its existence contributed resources to Azure Flames. He had always wanted to find the culprit, and now, the person he was looking for was right before him. What does this have to do with me? Flying Dragons is no more. There's no point in saying all these. Caspian said nonchalantly. Arrogant. Incredibly arrogant. After hearing Caspian's words, Astor was furious. How dared he be so arrogant? Are you courting death? Astor shouted angrily and swung the large hammer in his hand at Caspian. His figure appeared robust as he wielded a pair of heavy hammers, yet his movements were unexpectedly swift. The onlookers were surprised to see Astor attacking without any further discussion. However, it was understandable. Azure Flames was considered a top-tier force, and they had always been proud. As the sect leader, Astor couldn't remain indifferent after being underestimated. Astor was filled with killing intent as he slammed his hammers toward Caspian. He lived up to his title as the master of Azure Flames. Every move he made was a lethal strike. Everyone thought Caspian was as good as dead. They were sure that Caspian would get beaten into a pulp. Cole's face bore a faint smile. He intended to use Azure Flames to eliminate Caspian. Unexpectedly, Astor fell into Cole's trap. He decided to fight against Caspian for a small group like Flying Dragons. Now, all Cole had to do was stand by and watch the show. If someone could kill Caspian, it'd save him a lot of trouble. Wylie was also delighted. He thought Caspian would not survive Astor's attacks. If someone else could help kill Caspian, why not? Mr. Lynch, Melvin exclaimed. He had intended to intervene, but it was too late. Astor was too quick. The pair of massive hammers were now less than 3 feet away from Caspian's face. Astor sneered as he could already imagine Caspian's brains splattering everywhere. He believed no one could withstand his hammers. As the heavy blows were about to hit him, Caspian's brows furrowed. He threw a punch. There was no taunting tone and intricate techniques. It was just an ordinary punch. Everyone thought Caspian was doomed as they saw the scene unfolded. But they didn't notice Astor's face growing increasingly grim. The two collided. Before Astor's hammers could hit Caspian, Astor was blasted away by Caspian's punch. Astor staggered back a few steps before steadying himself by bracing the hammers against the ground. He stared at Caspian in shock. He was one of the top Eternal Grandmasters, almost reaching the pinnacle, yet he couldn't withstand Caspian's fist. Caspian withdrew his hand and stood with his hands behind his back. He felt that Astor's hammers were weaker compared to the immense strength of the Reaper. The Reaper had broken through adversity and unleashed a lethal strike. His moral spirit made his strike incredibly powerful. Looking at Aster now, his lethal move was only driven by anger, which caused him to lose his composure. Silence. A deadly silence. In just one move, victory and defeat were set in stone. How is this possible? Aster couldn't take on Caspian's punch. Why haven't I heard of his name before? Everyone present was utterly astonished. The master of azure flames, Aster, couldn't fight against Caspian's seemingly ordinary punch. Avery was so surprised that she covered her mouth. Cole and Wylie both furrowed their brows. As for Caspian, he remained composed, but within his profound gaze lurked an endless intent to kill. Chapter 256, I Dare To. After a moment, Caspian smiled contemptuously. He looked at Aster and said disdainfully, "Is this the strength of the elite gang? If you're not convinced, we can fight again." Aster turned pale. He wanted to kill Caspian right now, but given the previous fight, he knew that Caspian's strength was far superior to his. He couldn't suffer a loss. Flying dragons no longer existed. It wasn't wise for him to be at odds with Caspian. Humph. I wasn't ready just now. I'll let you go this time. Next time, I'll make you beg for mercy. Aster snorted coldly. Although his words sounded very powerful, everyone knew he feared Caspian. Everyone was shocked. The master of azure flames, Aster, gave in so easily. The matter of flying dragons could only end here. Even if everyone knew the culprit was before them, no one would dare to fight Caspian again. He would also be famous in this area. He used a regular punch to knock Aster away. Seeing his calmness, Cole became solemn. He originally wanted Aster and Caspian to fight each other before he could seize the opportunity to take down azure flames. Aster clearly knew when to stop. Afterward, Cole said while looking at everyone has seen it. Aster won't fight for flying dragons anymore. We can't say much either. Next, we'll focus on the selection of an alliance leader. I think I can take this position. Suddenly, the head of the Lander family, Georgie, stood up and shouted, "I object." Cole narrowed his eyes and looked at Georgie. "Georgie, tell me the reason for your objection." "There's no reason. I just think you're not suitable for it. Mr. Lynch is the most appropriate to take the leader position," Georgie said. As soon as his words came out, everyone was shocked. Was Georgie out of his mind? He wanted to let Caspian take charge of the overall situation. He destroyed flying dragons and had become enemies with azure flames. Azure flames would disagree with Georgie's proposal. Cole scolded, "That's nonsense. Caspian destroyed flying dragons. He's our common enemy. There's no way he can take on this important position. Stop messing around here. No one will support you." The Hersey family agrees. The Schultz family agrees. The Jacobs family agrees. The Woolery family agrees. The Carlson family agrees. Apart from the Zan family, the rest of Naporia's 8 noble lineages stood up. The Zan family was relatively mysterious and rarely appeared in public. Seeing this scene, Cole immediately became furious. These bastard elite families were openly opposing him in public. He already planned to get rid of these prestigious families. But he didn't expect them to unite and take the lead in opposing him. He had secured his seat as alliance leader. There was absolutely no way anyone else could change this outcome. Celestial Sanctum also agrees. "I support Mr. Lynch as our alliance leader." Melvin stood up. Naporia's 7 noble lineages and Celestial Sanctum both sided with Caspian. Everyone looked at Caspian surprisingly. He smiled and said nothing. He looked calm and indifferent. It was as if all the matters had nothing to do with him. At this time, Cole suddenly laughed. "I didn't expect that. I didn't expect the elite families in Naporia to be in cahoots with the Celestial Sanctum. Even if all of you agree, you should listen to other people's opinions. The other ancient martial families might disagree with this proposal." He didn't panic. He thought Celestial Sanctum and the 8 noble lineages weren't a threat. If others disagreed, there was no way Caspian would take the position. The position of alliance leader was still his. Everyone present turned their attention to Aster and Avery. Aside from Galecrest, the other influential forces were Azure Flames and Skyfeather Pavilion. Aster's and Avery's decisions were likely to affect the turn of events. Cole knew well about their influence. He looked at them and asked with a smile, "What do you think about this matter?" "I agree. Caspian should take the position of alliance leader. Avery stood up. Then, everyone was in an uproar. They didn't expect that Avery would side with Caspian. Caspian smiled lightly, still looking calm. Cole's expression darkened. He gritted his teeth, face full of killing intent. He wondered what Avery meant. Was she going to become his enemy? Seeing that Avery had expressed her stance, others looked at Astor. He was stunned for a moment. Avery's decision also surprised him. Now, he was in a dilemma and became everyone's focus. Mr. Stevens, what do you think? Cole asked, glaring at Astor. Astor hesitated, not knowing how to answer. He didn't want to support Cole, let alone Caspian. No matter who became the alliance leader, it wouldn't be good for him. But now he had to choose between the two of them. Just when he was hesitant, Avery looked at him. Understanding her hint, he suddenly realized something. If Cole became the alliance leader, he would continuously weaken other forces. They all had to follow Cole's orders. Although Caspian was powerful, he didn't belong to any force. Since he destroyed flying dragons, there was no need to hold him accountable further. Astor looked at Avery and smiled. Avery the Beauty also supports Mr. Lynch, so why should I object? I also agree that Mr. Lynch be the alliance leader of Diatoran's ancient martial families. Cole was furious. What on earth were Astor and Avery doing? Seeing that they had chosen Caspian, everyone else also made their choice. Apart from Galecrest, other forces agreed that Caspian became the alliance leader. Cole instantly became the clown. However, he didn't want to give up. He stared at Caspian. Mr. Lynch, do you dare to be the alliance leader? If you're careless, your life may be in danger. His words were threatening. He wanted to scare Caspian away so that he could naturally become the alliance leader. Yet, Caspian wasn't afraid of him at all. He looked at Cole and said coldly, "It's just an alliance leader. I dare to take this position." Chapter 257, as expected. Cole's face turned red with anger, but Caspian wasn't afraid of him and agreed to others' proposals. He seemed indifferent. It was as if he didn't care about the leader's position. At this moment, Cole wanted to kill Caspian, but he wasn't sure he would succeed. Judging from the battle between Caspian and Astor, Caspian was powerful. "Wylie," he shouted. Wylie was still in shock. He thought Cole would take the position of alliance leader. He never expected Caspian to appear and receive support from other forces. He came back to his senses when he heard Cole calling him. He looked at Cole. The next moment, he knew what Cole meant. Since he had joined Galecrest, he had to make some contributions. Cole feared Caspian's strength and wanted him to test Caspian's limits. He didn't want to take action, but he relied on Cole. Thus, he had to follow Cole's orders. He pointed at Caspian and scolded, "Caspian, you use tricks to destroy Mahayan Pavilion. I'll kill you." As soon as he finished speaking, he mustered all his strength and rushed out. He smashed his fist toward Caspian's face. Everyone else was a little surprised when Wylie suddenly took action. What shocked everyone the most was that Caspian even destroyed the Mahayan Pavilion. Caspian was calm when he saw Wylie rushing toward him. He still fought back with a seemingly ordinary punch. After the two heavy punches collided, Wylie's face twisted and he flew backward. Then, he spat out a large mouthful of blood. He fell hard to the ground, extremely embarrassed. Seeing this scene, Astor shook his head. He could barely take one punch from Caspian, let alone Wylie. Cole's expression darkened when he saw Wylie spit out blood after being punched by Caspian. "Let's go." Cole waved and prepared to leave with his men. The others had given their support to Caspian to be the alliance leader. He would only embarrass himself if he continued to stay. There was no need to continue this martial arts competition. When he turned around, the leader of Celestial Sanctum, Melvin, and the heads of other elite families shouted in unison, "Congratulations, Mr. Lynch." Astor and Avery looked at each other and followed suit. "Congratulations, Mr. Lynch." All the ancient martial families present saluted to Caspian. Their voices echoed throughout the square. Caspian stood with an unchanged expression. He just smiled slightly. He didn't care about the alliance leader position at all. To him, such a position wasn't even worth mentioning. Cole was just about to leave when he heard the voices coming from behind him. He became furious and spat out a mouthful of blood. At this moment, he wanted to cut Caspian into pieces. His plan was perfect. But Caspian had ruined everything. After seeing Cole leave, everyone present started chatting. They were all talking about Caspian. Mr. Lynch, congratulations on becoming Alliance leader. Everyone came over to congratulate Caspian. Nice to meet you, Mr. Lynch. At this moment, Avery walked up to Caspian with an enchanting figure. Seeing her sudden appearance, everyone couldn't help but take a few more glances. Everyone looked almost obsessed after seeing her. He smiled lightly. Avery's beauty could enchant the souls. Her smiles had already bewitched those men. Nice to meet you, Ms. Kirk. She realized that he wasn't affected in the slightest by her charm. She looked surprised. An ordinary man would be fascinated when he saw her taking the initiative to greet him. But Caspian was unbothered. She finally understood why he could destroy Mahayan Pavilion. His identity must have been extraordinary, and his strength was even more unfathomable. She smiled. Mr. Lynch, you're indeed different. I hope we can have a chat next time. There will be a chance. He nodded slightly. Okay, I'll leave now. She said no more and left with her people. Astor stood far away, wanting to come over and curry favor with Caspian. But he felt embarrassed. After thinking about it, he left the square with his men. Bluestone Square was originally bustling with noises. As those forces left, it quieted down. Honey, let's go. Caspian took Willow's hand and prepared to leave. She was confused by everything that happened there. She didn't understand what happened, but she didn't care. You bastard. That's unreasonable. Caspian, I'll kill you one day. Cole was furious. As soon as he returned to the main hall of Galecrest, he started smashing things. When the others saw this scene, they were frightened and didn't dare to speak. They believed that whoever spoke out wouldn't end up well. He was so angry that he was about to explode. He worked hard to gather those forces just to strengthen Galecrest. However, Caspian got the advantage in the end, while he gained nothing. Caspian became the Alliance leader and insulted him in front of many. He had never suffered this kind of humiliation. Those people probably laughed at him behind his back. Sir. At this time, Wylie stood up. He still had some bandage wrapped around his forehead, as he got seriously injured in the fight with Caspian. Seeing everyone's silence, he could only stand up. Hearing his voice, Cole turned around and stared at him angrily. Wylie, how dare you stay here? It's all because of you. If you hadn't come to Naporia, I wouldn't have invited Caspian. Now it's all over. I tried hard to plan everything, but he got the gains. Cole was furious and vented all his anger on Wylie. If Wylie hadn't surrendered himself to Galecrest, nothing would have happened. Seeing Cole's angry look, he felt extremely uneasy. He said tremblingly, Sir, please calm down. We should discuss what to do next. Now that all forces are on Caspian's side, we must think of a countermeasure. If we continue to sit still, the situation will get worse. Upon hearing that, Cole turned around and sat down, calming down his anger. He asked coldly, now that the matter is over, do you have any good ideas? Chapter 258 Billion's Gift List. Wylie said seriously, there's only one way. We can defeat them one by one. If the 8 noble lineages hadn't interfered, Caspian wouldn't have been the Alliance leader. We must attack the 8 noble lineages and deal with Caspian. Cole rubbed his chin and thought for a while. Celestial Sanctum and Naporia's 8 noble lineages are just Caspian's puppets. It's not difficult to destroy them. By the way, what's Billy's current situation? Is there any progress? He asked. Fortunately, he saved a trump card and was able to give Celestial Sanctum a blow. Billy and Night Shadow have arrived in Easton. Ask Billy to contact Easton's forces as quickly as possible. Find a way to destroy the Celestial Sanctum in the shortest possible time, Cole said coldly. Yes, sir. Wylie nodded. He smiled slightly, but Cole didn't notice it. I'll leave it to you to deal with the 8 noble lineages. Kill the elite families who take the lead, Cole calmly said as he stared at Wylie. Yes, I'll do it right away. Wylie didn't dare to disobey him. Naporia was also thrown into chaos from this moment on. Naporia Grand Hotel. Willow was curious about Naporia and wanted to walk around. Caspian arranged for Macy to stay with her to keep her safe. He sat on the sofa in the luxury suite. He could feel that troubles in Naporia had just begun. Caspian, do I need to destroy Galecrest? It'll save you time, Sylvia, who was standing aside, asked. Other forces weren't worth mentioning in front of the Diateranian god of war. He shook his head. Don't worry. It's not the time to take action yet. Our special forces. Soldiers can rest for now. The best strategy is to subjugate the enemy without fighting. With a little strategy, Galecrest will decline. Yes. Sylvia nodded, following his instructions. The king asked him to form an investigative team to eliminate the remaining evil forces of Diatoran. Of course, he wouldn't let go of the evil forces that lurked in South Lake City and other cities. He felt that some hidden underground forces could no longer bear it. As long as he threatened their interests, they would take action. Caspian, shall we go back to South Lake City? There doesn't seem to be much movement here, Sylvia asked curiously. He said calmly, wait for a bit. Someone will come knocking on our door. Upon hearing that, Sylvia hesitated. She felt that she gradually couldn't guess his thoughts. At this time, someone knocked on the door. Mr. Lynch, I'm Georgie Landor. The heads of the elite families would like to meet you. A respectful voice came from outside. Sylvia was stunned for a moment and looked at Caspian. He guessed it right. He had just said that someone would come. Then, several elite families from Naporia arrived at their doorstep. Come in, Caspian said. Afterward, Georgie led 6 people into the luxury suite. Nice to meet you, Mr. Lynch. The heads of 7 noble lineages greeted Caspian in unison. They stood in front of him respectfully. Caspian glanced at them and asked, is one missing? The Zan family seems a little special. Only 7 of the 8 heads of the 8 noble lineages were here. Everyone looked at each other, not knowing how to answer him. Mr. Lynch, the Zan family has always kept a low profile. The head of the Zan family hasn't shown up for a long time. No one knows where he is, Georgie said. Hearing that, Caspian frowned. The mysterious Zan family piqued his interest. He waved and said, it doesn't matter if there is one less person. After listening to his words, several people present breathed a sigh of relief. They were also worried that he would get angry over the matter. What's the purpose of your sudden visit? Caspian asked, looking at everyone. Mr. Lynch, you've become the alliance leader of the Southern Forces. We've prepared a small gift to congratulate you. Please accept it. Georgie smiled. Then, he handed Caspian a gift list. Not bad. You guys are very generous. Caspian looked at the gift list and smiled. This gift list included many assets, which together exceed billions of dollars. A company on the gift list had a market value of several $1 million. It was a company founded by several elite families. They gave it to him directly. They spent a lot of money to curry favor with him. The heads of the other elite families smiled. They regarded Georgie as their spokesperson and let him take part in everything. You guys must have a purpose. If you have anything to say, just say it. I don't like beating around the bush. Caspian put down the gift list and looked at them. Georgie and the others looked at each other. Then, Georgie said respectfully, Mr. Lynch, we've drawn a line with Galecrest. Galecrest will target us. We hope you can help us. He laughed, picked up the coffee cup on the table, and drank it. He had already guessed that several elite families would come to visit him. The situation of these elite families was no longer looking good. If it was in his expectations, Cole was already thinking of ways to deal with them. But he was more curious about why the Zan family was so calm. Upon seeing him laughing, the heads felt uneasy. He smiled. I'll accept the gift. You guys can go back first. Georgie and the others were relieved after hearing that. Since Caspian had accepted their gift, he would help them overcome their crises. Thank you, Mr. Lynch. 7 noble lineages saluted to him and retreated. Caspian, who is the Zan family, they're so calm. Do you want me to remind them? Sylvia asked with a look of displeasure. Caspian laughed. It's not necessary. Someone will remind them. Once again, she didn't understand what he was thinking. After leaving the hotel, Georgie and others breathed a sigh of relief. However, their expressions gradually darkened. Georgie, we asked you to come forward, but it ended up costing us billions of dollars. Yes, it's not a small amount. And we still don't know whether Mr. Lynch can help us. Where's Vermont Zan? Why didn't he show up? He should be included, right? The heads of the elite families were in a rage. Do you think I want to be taken advantage of? Why don't you come and negotiate with Mr. Lynch yourselves? You guys are cowards, yet you blame me. Georgie rebuked. The others were stunned for a moment, feeling a little guilty. Let's go find Vermont and ask about his plans. We can't pay to keep him safe, Georgie suggested. Everyone nodded in agreement. Then, they prepared to set off to the Zan family. Chapter 259, The Most Mysterious Elite Family. Swallow Castle in Naporia was a building with a long history. The entire castle had a large area and was convenient for transportation. One of Naporia's 8 noble lineages, the Zan family, lived here. In the courtyard of the castle, an 80-year-old man in a suit was lying on a wooden rocking chair. He was Vermont Zan, the most prestigious person in the Zan family. He was low profile and didn't like to get involved in trouble. He had been living in Swallow Castle and rarely went out. At this time, he showed a trace of worry. A middle-aged man was standing in front of him. The man's name was Aaron Zan, his only son and now the head of the Zan family. Aaron just told him everything that happened in Naporia. I didn't expect that the situation would change so quickly. It seems that the Zan family is in danger, Vermont said in frustration while sighing. Dad, our biggest enemy should be Cole, and he didn't become the alliance leader. That's good. For us. Why are we in danger? Aaron asked, confused. He said gloomily. Georgie and the others have already sided with Caspian. They're openly opposing Galecrest. Do you think Cole will let us go? The elite families are in the same boat. Cole will take action against us sooner or later. Do you understand now? Vermont was helpless. He was a person with a great influence in Naporia. Yet, he had raised such a mindless son. He feared Aaron would ruin the Zan family after he passed away. Be prepared. Maybe Georgie and the others are already on their way. Dad, really? Are you sure they'll come? Aaron asked, stunned. He was beyond exasperated now. His son was indeed stupid. He explained, Georgie and the others want to curry favor with Caspian and seek his help. So, they must show some sincerity. To put it bluntly, they'll lose a lot of money. They're smart and won't want to suffer a loss. They'll come. After listening to that, Aaron realized something and said in shock, that Caspian is so mean. He shook his head. He's not mean but strategic. He's intelligent enough to make money without using his strength. At this time, the Zan family butler ran over and reported, Mr. Zan Sr., the heads of 7 noble lineages are here. It was as Vermont expected. Mr. Zan Sr. is here. Accompanied by a loud shout, Vermont and Aaron walked into the reception hall. He smiled and looked at the heads of 7 noble lineages. It's rare for you guys to come here. Are you guys here for coffee? Vermont, don't act dumb. You should know our purpose for coming here, Georgie said disdainfully. The 7 of us have given a lot of benefits to Caspian. We can't bear too many losses. You must bear a share. That's right. You're also one of Naporia's 8 noble lineages. You can't run away. The head stood up and went straight to the point. Aaron smiled sarcastically, and his expression turned grim. He said coldly, you guys insist on pleasing Caspian Lynch. What does that have to do with me? Has anyone come to me to discuss this matter? Upon hearing that, they were stunned. Aaron, the elders are talking. It's not your turn to interrupt. Do you have the final say on the Zan family? Georgie said harshly. How dared a junior speak rudely to them? Aaron was stunned, not knowing how to answer the question. Back off, Vermont shouted sharply. Then, he smiled and said to everyone, you guys are right. I'll contribute $20 million. Do you have any objections? Georgie and the others looked at each other and nodded. In this case, we won't continue to bother you. I hope you will walk the talk. As soon as he said that, Georgie and the others left Swallow Castle. Dad, why did you give away $20 million for nothing? This matter has nothing to do with us, Aaron asked with some confusion. He felt a little reluctant to take out $20 million at once. These family properties would belong to him in the future. Vermont slapped Aaron's face. This stupid son of his disappointed him terribly. You brainless brat. You're so short-sighted. If we don't spend $20 million, the Zan family will be the first to be in trouble. After he finished speaking, he turned and left. Caspian Lynch, it's all because of you. Just wait and see. Aaron was pissed off and clenched his fists. He gritted his teeth, looking like he wanted to kill Caspian. Naporia Grand Hotel. Caspian was still sitting on the sofa. He felt annoyed to see Sylvia pacing before him. "Sylvia, can you stop? You make me dizzy," he said coldly. Sylvia frowned slightly. "Caspian, you also drank coffee for 3 hours straight." He looked at her and couldn't help but smile. "I should taste the good coffee slowly. Besides, other people will come over soon." "Huh, who else will come?" At this time, someone knocked on the door again. Sylvia looked at Caspian in surprise, admiring him more. He was so good at predicting. "Hurry up and open the door for the guests," Caspian said while looking at the stunned Sylvia. "Okay." She nodded and went to open the door. As soon as the door opened, Astor and Avery walked in. "Hello, Mr. Lynch." Avery greeted him with a smile. Astor stood there stiffly, seemingly still hesitating. Avery glanced at him. Seeing her angry gaze, Astor had no choice. He stepped forward to show his respect. "Hello, Mr. Lynch." Caspian smiled and put down the coffee cup. They were the ones he had anticipated. The strength of 8 noble lineages didn't fascinate him. He smiled lightly. "Please take your seats." Upon hearing that, they sat down anxiously. He looked at Sylvia. "Sylvia, what are you doing?" "Serve them coffee." Chapter 260. Greedy Look. In Diatoran, the 8 noble lineages couldn't compare to Avery and Astor. Georgie and the others weren't even qualified to sit in front of Caspian. Sylvia nodded, then took 2 new cups. The moment Avery and Astor saw her, they were shocked. This was their first time meeting Sylvia, but they could feel that she wasn't simple. She had an extraordinary presence in every move she made. They didn't expect Caspian to have such a martial arts expert by his side. Most importantly, she obeyed his every word. Thus, they became more nervous. Silence fell in the room. Caspian asked with a smile, "What's the purpose of your sudden visit?" They looked at each other. "Mr. Lynch, everyone knows Galecrest's goals. Cole originally wanted to expand his power through the martial arts competition, but his plan failed. He won't let us go. Galecrest may take brutal revenge toward other ancient martial families." Avery looked worried. "Ms. Kirk, what are your plans?" he asked calmly. Avery told him her plan. "I've discussed this with Mr. Stevens. We want to cooperate with you to fight against Galecrest. You're the alliance leader. We'll obey your orders. Celestial Sanctum will also follow you. Galecrest will lose." He smiled faintly. "But why should I go to all the trouble to help you deal with Galecrest?" Astor said unpleasantly, "Since you're the alliance leader, you're responsible for maintaining peace among the forces." He interrupted. "I never wanted to be the alliance leader. It's you guys who insist on choosing me. Besides, you guys must be already in trouble if Cole becomes the alliance leader. I'm not a fool. I can see through your plans. You asked me to deal with Galecrest. If I succeed, Azure Flames and Skyfeather Pavilion will become the leading forces in the south of Diatoran. You guys just want me to fend off the risk and danger. Your plans are indeed good." His words rendered Avery and Astor speechless for a moment. That was what they thought. They planned to let Caspian take the lead in dealing with Galecrest. After he destroyed Galecrest, they would be the biggest beneficiaries. Unfortunately, he could see through their thoughts at a glance. Astor seemed unconvinced and wanted to say more. But Avery glared at him and signaled him to stop talking nonsense. She smiled charmingly. "Mr. Lynch, you've ruined Cole's plan. Aren't you worried that Colite will come for you? Miss Kirk, you're a beauty, but you're not clever enough. Why would I be afraid of Cole?" Caspian said disdainfully. At that, Avery froze. His identity had always been mysterious, and he was also powerful. But what surprised Avery and Astor was the fact that he was so confident and didn't take Cole seriously. He was so arrogant. They wondered how strong he actually was. Caspian said impatiently, "Let's stop talking nonsense. I can destroy Galecrest, but I'll take all of Galecrest's assets. I'll only give you 1/10 of it." Hearing that, Astor and Avery were a little shocked. Galecrest had many properties in Naporia. A rough estimate of the combined assets was more than a few billion. He was so greedy to annex such a large part. "Caspian, you're so greedy. Do you think it's appropriate for you to take over all of Galecrest's assets?" Astor's expression darkened, and he stood up. "You bastard. How dare you be rude to Caspian?" Sylvia shouted as she stood up. Caspian waved and signaled her to step back. Caspian sneered. "I'm just taking what belongs to me. Once I destroy Galecrest, you guys will be the ones who benefit the most. At that time, you'll take over the scattered forces of Galecrest and expand your territories. In a few days, no force in the entire southern Diatoran can compete with you. You can imagine the perks. I don't think you're short-sighted." Avery smiled. "Mr. Lynch, 1/10 of Galecrest's properties is too little. It has nothing to do with me. It's your business to divide it. Of course, all Galecrest's properties will be yours if you're confident to destroy Galecrest. But I don't think you have the ability to do so. Otherwise, you wouldn't come to me," he said unceremoniously. Hearing his words, the two couldn't help but look at each other. They originally wanted to negotiate with him, but they didn't expect him to be so domineering. Soon, the two nodded. Avery took a deep breath, then stood up. "Mr. Lynch, we agree with your condition. I hope our cooperation will go smoothly," he said calmly. "Don't worry. I always keep my promises. In this case, we'll leave first." They stood up and prepared to leave. After all, they got what they wanted. There was no point in continuing to stay here. They walked out of Naporia Grand Hotel. Astor complained, "He's so greedy. I've never seen such a shameless person. He didn't do anything but already planned to swallow Galecrest whole. That's unreasonable." Avery smiled charmingly. "Mr. Stevens, please calm down. Caspian is right. As long as he destroys Galecrest, we'll have endless resources in the future. When the time comes, we can unite to expand our territory and overthrow him easily." His anger subsided a little. Then, they stared meaningfully at each other for a few seconds. Skyfeather Pavilion and Azure Flames might fight each other if Caspian managed to destroy Galecrest. They knew this very well but didn't point it out. In the hotel, Sylvia said unhappily, "Caspian, Astor is too arrogant. He's just a loser. I want to teach him a lesson." "There's no need to argue with him. Let them do whatever they want. We just need to reap the benefits." Caspian waved. His purpose was to restore the stability of the country. By getting rid of those evil forces, Diatorians would live peacefully.